Now, I'll turn to Rachel Bitecofer, who is a democratic strategist and a political scientist and an election forecaster. And we're just so honored to have her at our meeting tonight. She's author of the hit new book, Hit 'em Where It Hurts, How to Save Democracy by Beating Republicans at Their Own Game. And she's a regular commentator on MSNBC's Morning Joe news program. Rachel is the editor of the Cycle newsletter, to which I subscribe. And she also served as a senior advisor to the Lincoln Project. Rachel, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so much for having me and letting me come and talk to you guys. Pima County, woo, Arizona. I'm so excited about Arizona. It was a huge success story in 2022, and I know it's going to be again in 2024. If you haven't had an opportunity to check out Hit 'em Where It Hurts, I just want to kind of talk about what that book does. It's not tinkering with the strategy, or the messaging up in the tree limbs. What it's doing is taking it kind of at the base, ripping the tree out by the roots and saying, hey, Democrats, there are some things that we're doing strategically poorly. We're great executors, but we're not running the best and optimal strategy. And it's because we have kind of built a system around an electorate that doesn't exist. We kind of assume the electorate knows more about what's happening around it than it does. And the first half of the book is bringing everybody into my political science brain. Political science has been studying American voter knowledge and behavior for a really long time. And folks, it learned pretty early on that most people don't know much about how government works or who's involved in government outside of the president, maybe their governor. They definitely don't know who their state legislator may be. So our system has kind of just assumed people have a base of knowledge that isn't there. And the Republican system has moved on from that assumption starting in the mid-2000s. So the second part of the book talks about the Republican strategies that come with Karl Rove with the gay marriage bans in 2004, because believe it or not, in 2004, 11 states had the opportunity to ban gay marriage, even my lovely liberal blue state of Oregon, and all 11 banned it. So public opinion and everything shifts in about a decade, and we might forget that. And then building on that and what they did to John Kerry, the Swift Vote Veterans for Truth campaign, they really perfected and deployed a new electoral strategy starting in the 2010 midterms that they used to take their party from the precipice of being out of the political wilderness for decades after causing the Great Recession and the Iraq War debacle. All of a sudden, a year later, they are winning 63 seats in the House. And it really is kind of the origin story of how I ended up becoming who I am and studying what I study, because I remember thinking, how did that happen? And the backlash to Obamacare, though certainly a major factor in that cycle, didn't really explain exactly how. And so I've been paying attention for a long time about how Republicans electioneer and also how Democrats do it. And trying to get Democrats to see, okay, if you don't have an informed and engaged electorate, then what you're doing in terms of policy appeals, median voter stuff, bipartisanship, that's not really going to compete well against a Republican system that's branding Democrats and broad brushing Democrats. So every Democrat's a socialist who wants to steal your guns. More lately, we want to turn your male children into girls. So very hyperbolic branding exercise. And we're going into these swing races with much better candidates, much better biographies, certainly temperamentally and intellectually better than J.D. Vance. But we're not winning because they're yelling at the electorate, talking to it as it is. And we are reasoning with the electorate, talking to an electorate that doesn't really exist. So I call this strategy negative partisanship strategy. Negative partisanship is the concept of, okay, we all have our identifications as Democrats, and we're all Democrats for reasons like we love equality and education and whatever, good government. But we also, because of that, and this system, which is a two-party system, have negative emotions to the opponent, to the opposite side. And those negative emotions, it's easy to say it's hate, but really it's fear fear and threat, loss aversion stuff. And that's what Republicans got so right about electioneering. And so getting Democrats to switch over by explaining to them the realities of the American electorate, that it changes the strategic focus of a campaign, because it then becomes, okay, if the electorate doesn't know about the Republican Party's extremism, then it becomes the campaign's job to make sure that they know, right? And I liked what I heard in some of these candidate pitches, because they're like, I'm going to take the fight right to them. And they've been ruling the roost for a long time. And that's true, especially in places like Pima. Republicans have been in control for a very long time. It's not 1992 anymore. We don't have to wait for a verdict on how their governance performs for people. It's a really terrible record. And it contrasts with our really excellent record, by the way. So teaching people how to be a brand ambassador, how to define the stakes in this election cycle. This is an existential threat, fight for the survival of democracy. Women, I'm a woman. I have half of the constitutional rights I had just a couple of years ago. People are needing champions, and they want to see Democrats like Andy Beshear in Kentucky, and Gretchen Whitmer in Michigan, and Arizona with Adrian Fontes running and telling people, I'm going to take the fight to the Republican Party. I am not going to let voters walk into the ballot box, and at least not, they should know what they're voting for in that process. So it's a big strategic shift, and the back end of the book teaches you how to do it at the micro level. If you're running a campaign, if you're a candidate. Luckily, Jamie Harrison's all in on this book. I'll be training all 57 state party committees on this actually in April. And they're all getting copies of the book. So I'm very excited about the future, especially at the state party, coming down, to these local and county parties.
Let's open it up for questions. If you have a question, put it in the chat. One of the points you make in your book is that the Democrats should build themselves as the party of freedom, freedom of speech, freedom to choose, freedom from hate, and freedom to love. And our message should be, don't let the Republicans take your freedom away. Banning books doesn't protect children, it takes away their freedom. Tell us more about that approach.
What we want to be doing in our conversations with Republicans is a pivot and attack, right? Like, we want to make sure that we're talking about the stuff that benefits us and hurts them. So obviously the Dobbs repeal and other things like that. And then forcing them to go on defense by going on offense. So you just alluded to, one situation, and what you can do in that kind of situation when they're asking you about, whatever they want to talk about, you pivot. So they say the words protect kids, for example, right? They want to talk about books and banning books and protecting kids from, naughty books. You can use that as an opportunity to talk about their obstruction on gun violence, and make sure that when you do so, you're making it very clear that the reason there's no action on guns, the reason there's no progress, is because the Republican Party won't vote for it. So clearly naming that villain and pointing people right to that is very important. So we know people are angry, right? We know Americans, there's so many things triggering that, but let's just take the economic realm. Coming out of a pandemic, high inflation, now you have to raise mortgage rates, so people always are going to have economic angst, right? But the problem is right now, they point that angst at the only people doing anything to help them. And they're going to continue to do that unless we make it clear who is holding back, their economic vitality. So it's really important for us to, highlight that issue and make it clear at the doors that, hey guys, if Republicans take over, they have a radical plan to revisit whether there should be a 40-hour work week, revisit whether there should be a federal minimum wage. We're talking about radical change, and I don't think we want to be at the doors talking about, oh, did you know Joe Biden passed a $35 insulin cap? I'm not saying you don't ever campaign on that, but you have to be if you're at a door of a senior and you talk about that issue, you have to do the next thing, which is to tell them, and Republicans all voted no on it, and they're coming for it. Because right now we have a situation where we're not getting any of the credit, and we're looking at the media like, oh, we should be getting more credit. Well, that's partly because our comms are not designed to do so. our messaging strategy from media people, politicians, all the way down to campaigns and activist groups. We are not making it clear Democrats give, Republicans take. Every time you're talking, you want to be very explicit and putting that angst where it belongs. But I also think that we should be telling people the stakes of this election. I don't think people should be left to just assume that they know, oh, and by the way, if Donald Trump wins, they're going to, enact radical changes of the federal government. They're going to consolidate power, going to, pass a national abortion ban, all of the things that they're openly telling us they're going to do. They're going to do mass deportations, basically a national show me your papers law, like Arizona saw in 2010. So I think we need to be having those conversations at the doors of Latinos. We need to be having conversations with Black voters about what's coming to the Black community. We need to be telling people who are very upset about Gaza what they are openly, on the campaign website for Trump stuff, like this is campaign material from the campaign, laying out mass deportation plans, loyalty tests to subject to naturalized or student visa, people who are in the US on visas, to make sure that they don't espouse anti-American views. And folks, what they mean by that is any sympathy basically for Gaza, right? So nothing is going to be the same. We're going to get radical change under this Republican Party, and we need to make sure voters know what that change is going to be so they can decide beforehand whether they really want it or not.
I got another question about the Republican noise machine. Gary Tucker wants to know, how do we outshout Donald Trump? He's saturated in the media. How do we combat that?
Really, it's kind of the opposite problem these days, folks. They don't show a whole heck of a lot of Trump. And that's why, I know it's hard to hear this, but that's why, Trump has a slight advantage in some of these general election polls. They never hear anything about him because the media answered our call, which was to stop, right? Like, please make it go away. But at the same time, when it goes away, it goes away. Okay, it stops. Like, people stop thinking about Donald Trump, the maniac that told him to drink bleach and was getting 3,000 people killed and like all the crazy stuff that he did, because he's out of sight, out of mind, right? So, I think the media needs to cover him more. I think they would need to especially cover the age, dementia, senility problems that Trump exhibits in every public appearance that he does. That being said, in terms of like the propaganda network, and that's going to come from the right-wing media and all these Republican campaigns, how do you outshout that? And that's what I'm focused on, right? And my point is, if you've got a voter in the middle and you're talking about $35 insulin and a bipartisan infrastructure deal and la la la, and I'm going to do this and that, and the other side is, these people are crazy. They're socialists. They're extremists. They're going to turn your boy children into girls. They're going to get you killed by brown people. Good luck winning it. And we know it doesn't win because we saw all 4 races in the Senate cycle, last cycle in 22, that ran that strategy, the old strategy. Ohio, North Carolina, Florida, and Wisconsin all got licked. Okay. It was only where we tried new strategy, this strategy, focused on offense, focused on the issue that is most toxic to the Republicans right now, which is freedom, right? Freedom, and through the not abstract, concrete, a situation with abortion right now, and the knowledge that Republicans would pass a national abortion ban, right? Getting people who are in states like mine, which are in Oregon, where I don't have to worry about a statewide abortion ban. To understand, though, that in this future the Republicans have planned for us, there's going to be a national abortion ban. There's not going to be anywhere left to go hide. So, kind of tying back to that first question about freedom and fascism, getting people to put this stuff into concrete terms for people. When Biden says he's going to run on democracy, I think some people take that like literally, like he's going to talk about democracy, but really what that means, he's going to be talking about individual liberty and freedom, right? And what's at stake if, gay people can no longer get married, women can't control their own bodies, so on and so forth. And, getting people also to get beyond some of the misperceptions in liberal, like political thought or analysis about things like, for example, fascism. People will say, well, we can't use that word because no one knows what it is. And as I write in the book, yes, exactly. No one knows what it is. No one knows what socialism is either, folks. But over the years, they've been doing it for 10 years now. So we're never going to be able to offset that intensity and the depth of that operation. But we can get started now, and we must, because, you know, when we look at public opinion polls, I ran a survey once and asked people, what's the first word that pops in your mind when you hear the word Democrat, Republican, right? For Democrat folks, it was socialist. Okay. So like no one knows what it is, but they know it's bad and they know it's connected to Democrats. And that's what we have to do with fascism. CRT, which I also use in the book to lay out how they do their strategies, layered up from the state legislative race to the House race to the statewide. They all ran on CRT. Almost none of them, probably none of those candidates gave two shits about race in school, especially Glenn Youngkin, sweater vest Glenn, because he's a business Republican, but he defined the race around something no one had ever heard of, including me, 10 months previous, and made it the #1 issue in the Virginia 2021 cycle. So we can definitely brand them. We have to brand them with fascism. We have to make people afraid of it, whatever it might mean to them. And the only way to do that is repetition and widespread use.
We've got a question in the chat from Robert Ritchie, who says that he's finding a lot of indifference and apathy and difficulty convincing people that we're having anything other than politics as usual. And Americans are convinced that voting really doesn't make a difference. How do you respond to that? How do we overcome that?
The fatigue factor is a huge concern. So like when I'm modeling out this election cycle and I have a whole bunch of variables and factors that I track, and I don't put out public forecast anymore. I work directly in elections, so that would not be cool. But I still track these things. And, you know, I've got a whole bunch of pros and cons. Frankly, guys, there's a ton of cons on the other side that we're not ever talking or angsting about, okay? Tons. But let's just focus on our con. We have a fatigue issue, at least in public opinion data, certainly in anecdotal evidence, and then some of these interactions, right? But we're not seeing that when we run a campaign face to face against MAGA. We define them as an extremist threat to people, and voters are showing up and voting against MAGA, and we're winning every election. I mean, ever since we started running this kind of campaign. So 2022, right? The big red wave, where'd it go? Oh, we killed half of it. Okay, we didn't get to kill it all, but this time we're going to try to get the whole swing map going on team reform strategy. You have to be running against the Republican Party's brand. People are pissed off. People are always going to be pissed off, especially the more comfortable humans become, the more pissed off we are, because the more time we have to be angsty and pissed off about it. So right now, there's no one pushing that anger anywhere except for at us, where it naturally falls through this thing called issue ownership, where, you know, voters don't know shit about the system, but they kind of have impressions, and they'll say, oh, what party's good on education? They'll say Democrats. And then what party's good on healthcare? Democrats. What party's good on the economy? Republicans. What party's good on national defense? Republicans. And you guys should be going like, wait, what? And so that's what I'm saying is, now they did their whole voodoo economics experiment and destroyed the American middle class and absolutely decimated rural America. Let's go push that angst, this righteous anger that's genuine in a lot of these places, to where it belongs, on the people who did it to them, and not be equivocating because, you know, Bill Clinton also did NAFTA. Whoopty shit. Okay. The reason Bill Clinton did NAFTA is it was Republicanomics, and like that was a huge economic shift. Like it wasn't mild. We were going one way with the economy. We're leading the world, top infrastructure, top schools, top everything, top middle class. And they decide to screw it all up with this Reaganomics deficit spending thing that we've been saddled with ever since. And, you know, it's killed rural America. So I think we should just put that right at the feet of the Republican Party. And that's a long-term project, obviously, I think would suspect might have some short-term benefits, but it's certainly nothing that you can accomplish with one cycle. But we know that it can be done because Republicans did that to white working class voters. They used to vote for Democrats. Democrats used to be the party of rural And the way that that changed was Republicans hammered our brand. Okay. And it's time now, I think, for us to flip that script on them.
Thank you so much, Rachel. It's just been fabulous. This has also been a fabulous meeting. I want to thank all of our candidates and thank Nancy Guterres for telling us all about the nonsense that's going in the legislature and how we can support them. So keep an eye on the newsletter from LD18. We are your source for information on how to turn Arizona blue. And with that, I'm going to conclude the meeting, and I want to say thank you so much to everybody for coming tonight. Bye-bye now.